So these 5 genes, everybody has those. When you have these genes that are broken, let me point some of these out. Do you see this gene right here? 44% of you have this gene not working. I won't tell you what the nickname is for that gene. Brett, I'm going to keep my promise. Where are you? Okay. I went to the speaker meeting this morning. Yes, that is called the MTFHR gene. If you ever want to look up research on that gene, please capitalize all of those letters, or you will find yourself on some really colorful websites. So this gene, 44% of you actually have a break in this gene. This is one of the most important genes in the human body because it takes folic acid and converts it into methylfolate. And while that doesn't sound like a big deal, folic acid is the most prevalent nutrient in the human diet. Folic acid, by the way, is an entirely man-made chemical. We make it in a laboratory. Folic acid does not occur anywhere naturally on the surface of the earth. You cannot find folic acid in nature. We make it in a lab, and then we have sold it to the public as a health vitamin, something that pregnant women need to have a healthy pregnancy. That's completely false. They need methylfolate to have a healthy pregnancy. 85% of all postpartum depression is directly related to the prenatal vitamin. There is not a single peer-reviewed published clinical study in the world linking pregnancy hormones to postpartum depression. There is tons of research linking that gene to postpartum depression. So what happens is when the most prevalent nutrient in the human body cannot be converted into something the body can use, you have a deficiency. And now what kind of things come from that deficiency? Well, the first thing is gut issues. You have gut issues and you think you have an allergy, but it drives you crazy because you eat the same thing over and over, and sometimes you have a reaction and sometimes you don't. Because it has nothing to do with what you're eating, it has to do with the pace of your gut. The speed of your gut is determined by that gene. If that gene is broken, you have suffered your entire life with gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, irritability, cramping, and you've never been able to pinpoint why. Because your body is missing a simple raw material called methylfolate. If you have this gene right here, there is about a 90% chance that you suffer from anxiety. And some of you may suffer from crippling anxiety, even borderline depression. You know what anxiety is? Anxiety is a fear of the future. It is an increase in your brain in a category of neurotransmitters called catecholamines, the same neurotransmitters that come out in a fight or flight scenario. How many of you suffer from anxiety or know somebody who suffers from anxiety? Holy cow. 70% of the room. You ask somebody that suffers from anxiety these 3 questions, I will prove to you that it is coming from that gene, and it can be fixed with methylated vitamins. And if anyone in this room has either had that problem and it's now fixed, or had a loved one who had that problem last year and it's now fixed, is there anyone in here that would like to tell that story? Because I ran into a couple people at the pool. There's one right there with their hand up. Can you come up to this microphone? If you start to say something bad, I'm just going to burn one of your eyes out with this laser pointer.
Yeah. I've already cried on stage.
Nothing will learn you like losing an eye to a laser pointer.
Yeah, so it was last year when you said this talk, and my daughter, just crippling anxiety, and just very inward in everything she did, and I was all in, ordered it for the whole family, and so within like 3 weeks of being on the supplements, she was into horses. It's kind of her way of dealing, and all of that. And her horse instructor didn't even recognize her. She was yelling across the barn and just a totally different person.
Amazing.
She joined the cheerleading team at her school.
Woo!
And like just wildly different. She couldn't even get out of her seat to get on stage when her classmates were, just going on stage to graduate before. And she took 5 of the 8 awards.
Wow.
Just this past year.
That's amazing.
And she was on stage and waving at everybody and just...
She's on no drugs. She's on no pharmaceuticals. That little girl took that test and all she's taking is vitamins. That's how we're going to change the world. That's how we're going to change the world. You have this gene right here. You have a history of hypertension in your family. How many of you either suffer from hypertension or have a loved one suffering from high blood pressure? You see, high blood pressure is the second leading cause of death in America. And most of people that actually suffer from high blood pressure, when they go to their doctor, they have a normal EKG, they have a normal EEG, they have normal heart and lung sounds, they have a normal dye contrast study, they have a normal cardiac catheterization. All their cardiac workup is normal. Why do they have high blood pressure? Their doctor will tell you, because your father had it, and your grandfather had it, and your great-grandmother on your mother's side had it. You genetically inherited that hypertension. Next time you know what to say. Oh, what gene did I inherit that caused that? Watch their face go blank. What happens is when you have this gene mutation, you cannot lower an amino acid in your blood called homocysteine. If this is a naturally occurring amino acid, but genetically we break this amino acid down into another harmless amino acid which quiets our mind. And if we can't quiet our mind, now we're told that we have ADHD. Or ADD, that's another famous one, or OCD, right? And so if I can't actually lower that amino acid, then what happens is it rises in my bloodstream. As it circulates around in my bloodstream, my arteries clamp down. If you make the pipes smaller in a fixed system, pressure goes up. And now we hold the heart responsible for a crime it hasn't committed. And we start pounding on a perfectly healthy organ with beta blockers and calcium channel blockers and diuretics, trying to pound a healthy organ into submission for a crime it is not committing, and we do this for decades. You will never convince me that 44% of Americans are so depressed they need to be on an antidepressant. 51% of Americans over 55 years old have a failing heart to the point where it needs medical intervention, or that nearly 60% of Americans suffer from a mental disorder. I'll never believe that. What I will believe is we are so nutrient deficient that without certain nutrients, we get the expression of those conditions. And so if you lower homocysteine, by the way, if you ever watched my video with Dana White, this is exactly what happened to Dana White. He was on 3 blood pressure medications. When I met him 10 weeks later, he was on no blood pressure medication. He had perfectly normal blood pressure. He was off of his antidepressants and off of his thyroid medication. And so we put these raw materials back into the human body, and that's how we just restore that vascular laxity to normal, and then the pressure returns to normal. Now, for you high-functioning entrepreneurs, if you have that gene broken right there, you have what's called consummate overachiever profile. You are your own worst enemy. You hold yourself to a very, very high standard. Right? You put a lot of pressure on yourself. You essentially decide the success or the lack thereof of your day by how many things you get done on an agenda that you set for yourself. You find yourself very easily disappointed in other people because you feel like they just can't do the basics. I know those laughs are like, yep, that's me, right there. I got spouses pointing at spouses. And when you lay down to go to sleep at night, you have a hard time falling asleep, not because you're not tired, but because your mind keeps you awake, right? So what happens is, as your environment quiets, your mind wakes up. So what if we could pull all these little anchors up off the ground? What if when you laid down, you could actually quiet the catecholamines and fall asleep? What if you could actually process thought in the right sequence, which is what we call attention deficit disorder? There actually is no such thing as ADD or ADHD. They are, trust me. Woo! I love you guys. I mean, I love you guys. Usually people are like, boo, and that's not true, and they need Ritalin, and they need Adderall, and they need Vyvanse. Interestingly, the same people that make folic acid, Monsanto, also makes Vyvanse and Ritalin. So folic acid is the leading cause of ADD, ADHD, and manic depression, and it's treated with Ritalin, Vyvanse, and Adderall. Just a coincidence, another coincidence I'll point out for you, not being a conspiracy theorist. So what happens is attention deficit disorder is not an attention deficit at all. It's an attention overload disorder. It is too many windows open at the same time. And so what happens is because we create thought at a faster rate than we dismantle thought, the mind gets clouded. You're thinking about a job you're working on. Your friend walks up. So you're thinking about a job, you start talking to your friend. While you're talking to your friend, you see a logo on their jacket. It reminds you of a vacation you want to take. Now you're thinking about a job, talking to your friend, looking at the logo, thinking about a vacation you want to take, right? All at the same time. And your friend's like, hey, Max, my grandmother died on Sunday. And you go, that's a great idea, right? That's when you know you got ADHD, right? So what if we could just put amino acids like L-methionine back into the body? L-methionine, as simple as L-methionine or trimethylglycine, amino acids that are already in your body, and you learn to down-regulate catecholamines. You learn to take those category of neurotransmitters that were in your brain, and you get to suppress them. You get to break down thought so that you can sequence thought properly. And now you all of a sudden don't have ADHD because you are not having an overactive mind. Modern medicine says if the mind is racing, let's put an amphetamine into the body, race the central nervous system to match the pace of the mind. That creates dependency. It creates something called tachyphylaxis. It can permanently alter the neuroplasticity of the brain. L-methionine is in your bloodstream right now. So if you have that gene mutation, you take L-methionine, you will notice a demonstrative change in your behavior. You will notice a night and day difference between children that have that MTFHR gene mutation, and you take them off of folic acid and put them on a methylated vitamin, and you have an entirely new child in the house in 3 to 7 days. Happens that fast, right? Instead of the school calling you and saying, little Johnny's not paying attention, he's disruptive, he doesn't finish his work, we need to bring in the Ritalin, right? So every single person that hasn't gotten that test, I want every human being to do that test once in your life. It's about $600. It's a gene test. You put the cheek swab in your mouth, you send it into a lab, they send it back. You will never guess what you need to supplement with for the rest of your life. You will stop supplementing for the sake of supplementing, and you'll start supplementing for deficiency. And when you supplement for deficiency, you start to thrive. And so that's my pitch.